I proclaim with all the power that is in me that the Inside Out podcast is the only true and living podcast on the face of the whole earth, with which I, Bruce Reginald McConkie, am well pleased, speaking under the podcast collectively as well as individually.
Welcome to Inside Out Live, all the way from Canada and from Utah. I'm Ian, and that's Jim. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Ian. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Having a good day. We had a podcast early today. We've got a fantastic lineup of amazing people coming on the podcast in the next few weeks. Sandra Tanner, Richard Bushman again, hopefully, John Sween, a whole bunch of other people. But tonight, Jim, we have a very, very special guest. And I think the best way for me to introduce this guest is to let you know that during my faith crisis or confidence in the church crisis, whatever you want to call it, there was one voice that helped me navigate a very traumatic experience for me going through that crisis. A voice that I looked for, an individual that I followed, whose counsel and advice and wisdom was just invaluable. This person helped me more than anyone else online, and I'm deeply grateful to him and I have enormous love and respect for him. And so a very special welcome on to Inside Out Live, Anthony Miller. Anthony, welcome.
Thanks, Ian. I really appreciate that. I'll never forget our discussions, as well as when we shared a Crown Burger when I was on the way back from Moab that year. Those were important times.
Thank you, and I feel the same way. And you know, we do these hopefully wonderful introductions to people because we have extraordinary guests and we try to be respectful. But for me personally, that introduction that we're doing with other guests wouldn't suffice for me. So you know, I am deeply grateful to you, Anthony, for your insights, your comments, your words of wisdom over the years at a time and a situation that you described that I'd never heard of before, called the dark night of the soul. That's the first time I heard that term was from you when you were posting this online. I don't think it originates from you. Could you just tell us a bit about that? And because I think that would resonate with a lot of our listeners and followers. What is that?
Yeah, so it comes from a poem that was written centuries ago. Saint John of the Cross wrote it, and if you look it up, you can find a Wikipedia page about the poem and read through the poem. And the poem actually is a celebration of a breaking free of prior bonds and a new understanding going forward. And then probably a couple decades ago or more, people in Christian communities, particularly people that had faith transition in the LDS community, in evangelical communities and so forth, started using this term, dark night of the soul, a little bit different than the poem came out. And the way that I would describe it, I mean, I describe it in my TED Talk, but the way I would talk about it is that it's an existential crisis where everything loses meaning. Relationships, roles, reputation, family connections, purpose in life, but there's a spiritual component to it. When the meanings that we attributed to our spiritual experiences or our relationship or experiences with the divine collapse on us, and it's so traumatic that the divine goes silent on us. No matter how much we cry out for connection to the divine, it's quiet. I don't know if that explains it, but those are the words that I would use to attribute meaning to dark night of the soul.
I think you've explained it really well. In my darkest hour, my loneliest hour, when I tried desperately to speak to one or two church leaders that I felt I had a relationship with, having served with them for many years, and learned very quickly that I couldn't even talk to those individuals, and really had no one to turn to. On my side of the family, they're not in the church. They're not remotely interested in the church, and they wouldn't understand if I tried to speak to them. They probably would say, "I told you so. You shouldn't have joined the church, at the age of 16 back then." But on my wife's side, where they're all very active, very strong, I at that time, there's no way I could have gone to them or even to my wife or my kids at that time. And so I felt completely alone. It was very traumatic. I remember driving through the Rocky Mountains, listened to a couple of podcasts. I'd read some of your comments and pulled over. It was in the winter. Driving through the Rocky Mountains in January is it's not the best time to drive, and these are not the best places to start, but I was absolutely just traumatized with emotion, and realized that the church true claims were not what they claimed to be, and it was just devastating. So it was such a very dark, lonely time for me. And I went online and I looked and I read and I listened to you and your podcasts and your comments. And Jim, out of all the podcasts, and John Delaney, I listened to him, and the wonderful people out there doing all great things. But Anthony's insights and just the way he characterized the situation just resonated with me so much. And I cried tears often, when I was going through that experience, but felt so grateful that there were people like Anthony out there who was trying to help people like me. And so I will always be very, very grateful to you, Anthony. I appreciate it. This is not the first time you've been on Inside Out. I think you've been on twice before, I think once or twice before.
At least once. Yeah. Right.
At least once. Yeah. And so it's just an absolute honor to have you on here. And also, there's a few things I think you want to talk about. Want to catch up with you, learn what you've been up to and what you've been doing, and your latest perspective and wisdom in terms of helping people. And of course, we want to talk about your TED Talk as well. Before we do that, Jim, do you have any opening comments or thoughts before we get into some of that?
No, I'm just really grateful. I think this is going to be a really remarkable thing. Anthony, I've watched your TED Talk multiple times, because I just think it's really concise and really just a focused way of describing the challenges of faith crisis, the experience of faith crisis. I mean, as you watch this, you get a sense of you get a sense of who you are as a person, and just how traumatic this was, how wrenching it was. And I just think the fact that you have allowed yourself to be that vulnerable has probably blessed far more lives than you know.
Thanks, Jim.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jim. So, today, could we get into your TED Talk? Could you give a little bit about the background?
Sure.
You've got this profound experience. You show that incredible courage and bravery by, going to a TED Talk, which is reaching hundreds of thousands of people, I suspect, through those talks. Give us the background. What led you to go under the TED Talk program and share your feelings and thoughts, and just kind of lead us up to and through that talk. And we've got the link to the talk, Jim.
Yes, we do. I've got to to the spot.
All right.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah. So TED as an organization does regional and national type of events, and they have a podcast and things like that. And then they also do TEDx events, which are local events in different communities around the world, where volunteers organize and submit proposals to TED about what they're going to do, and then they recruit speakers and they have themes and things like that. In Billings, Montana, right before COVID, decided to do the second TEDx Billings, and they started taking nominations for potential speakers, and the lead organizer reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in submitting a proposal to be a speaker at TEDx. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that. I've taught at Rocky Mountain College finance. I've been a financial planner for decades. I could talk about human behavior, behavioral finance. I could talk about entrepreneurship with my clients and my own experiences. I could talk about different life skills that have been helpful for me and informed my life. I said I did go through like a complete existential faith and identity crisis a few years back, and had a complete collapse of meaning. And what was born out of that is I created a local support group that now has over 100 people in it for people that have gone through a faith crisis. And he said, that's what we want you to talk about. He said, because the theme for TEDx Billings for this upcoming TEDx is about building and supporting our community. And that would be perfect because everyone knows someone that's gone through some form of existential crisis. And if you talk about that, that could be helpful. Plus what you did to build a support community. So it was going to happen, and then it got delayed because of COVID. It got delayed a whole year. And so what we did is we did training. We watched training from TED. We did local training in terms of how to do a TED Talk, how many times to practice it, what to do in terms of images that you use and how many you use, all sorts of different things, training for it. And I had prepared a talk that talked about faith development and faith crisis, like a professor would talk about it, like detached. And I didn't like it. I didn't like what I had prepared. And so I had 3 post-believing friends who I talked to about this, and 1 believing friend, and that I talked to about this. And one of my post-believing friends, when I shared him the copy of the talk that I had prepared, he's like, Anthony, this is not going to do what you want to accomplish. You can't just talk about it. What you need to do is you need to take people by the hand and you need to walk them through the experience. Like they're there with you. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. But I knew what he was expressing was what I needed to do. I needed to not talk about suicidal ideation or disassociation or things like that. I needed to walk people through the experience of what that was like. And so with less than a month before the event, I completely rewrote my talk and had support from these 3 different post-literal believing members, and then 1 believing member to get input from them about what I should do. And that's how I ended up with the talk that I gave. And if you'll notice in the talk, I only used the word Mormon in the very first sentence, so that the talk is more universal about faith and identity and existential crisis. And I was really concerned about how my believing friends and family might react to the talk. So it was really helpful to receive feedback from the 1 believing friend. And in fact, there was a mixed faith couple. The gals in our Mormon Spectrum group, and the mixed faith couple agreed to let me rehearse it in front of them the day before. And that was really meaningful too. So that's how it came to be. It was extraordinarily difficult. When you watch it, you recognize that I relived some of the trauma of my faith crisis on the stage. I was very, very concerned that I was going to break down crying to a level that I couldn't communicate, or that people couldn't understand me. So what we'll see is what came out of that process.
All right. Want me to pull this up here?
Yes.
All right. This is from the beginning. and we're going to play till 5. So this is about 5 minutes, right?
5.5 minutes. We're going to play to 5:45.
Okay, here we go. Hold on. Technical difficulties. I have to press the arrow there.
Oh, no sound.
That's a problem. Talk amongst yourselves for
All
just
right.
a moment. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening here.
Anthony, while Jim's trying to figure out the sound here, what I have learned from you, one of the qualities that you possess, which I leaned on, and it comes through very strongly in the TED Talk. In fact, it's the very essence of the TED Talk, is something that I've struggled with my entire life, and that is, and also the whole notion of creating a podcast, approaching Jim with the idea, and even having the strength or courage or vulnerability to do a podcast. And here we are live in front of people sharing our thoughts and feelings. The thing that I got from you most, including on the TED Talk, was your strength of vulnerability. I learned from you more than anyone for a long time that there is strength in being vulnerable, that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to talk about your thoughts and feelings as they are. And of course, you're going to get people who disagree, and that's okay. But for the most part, people are good, and they will, listen with compassion and understanding and try to make sense of it and try to understand it. But for me, you are the epitome, the example of strength through vulnerability, and that comes through in abundance in your talk. The fact that you're on stage doing something that I don't think I could ever do something like that. That's courage beyond me. But go ahead, Jim. Have you figured out the sound?
Oh, let's see if this works.
All right, go ahead.
In Phoenix, Arizona. We were poor.
Sorry.
My father had a difficult. My parents joined the Mormon Church when I was 3 years old in Phoenix, Arizona. We were poor. My father had a difficult time providing for us. We were used to being evicted. But our church community took care of us. You know how sometimes church congregations adopt a family for Christmas because otherwise that family might not have a Christmas? That was our family. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. My father struggled to provide support. So as the oldest of 4 children, I mowed lawns and delivered pizza, while my mother did sewing and alterations out of the little old modified farm shack of a house we rented. And we felt grateful for months. We only had to rely on our church for help with just food. My church gave me friends, community, and role models. It gave me hope of what a stable family could look like. As a 19-year-old, I served 2 years as a full-time missionary in Barcelona, Spain. As I dedicated 60 to 70 hours each week striving to bring people unto Christ through baptism and confirmation, I had many spiritual experiences. As I taught, contemplated scriptures, prayed, and performed ordinances like baptisms, I sensed a deep connection in my heart. Love, peace, joy, the fruits of the Spirit, a swelling warmth in my being. I attributed meanings to these experiences as if they were metaphorical vines that intertwined around my heart. The primary meaning was that these experiences were from God, giving me reliable divine witnesses of the truthfulness of the things I was teaching and reading, and that I was doing God's work. Approaching the end of my mission, I found myself in a deep internal struggle. I needed to know for sure whether the offering of my mission was acceptable to God. So I fasted and I prayed for several days, pleading in prayer for an answer. One evening, I found myself sitting on a couch in a small, humble apartment living room of a family we had recently taught and baptized, where I felt like I received my sacred answer from God. The mother of the family asked me to read her journal entry of the day of her baptism, and as I read it, I felt a softening in my chest, a warmth in my heart. Tears streamed down my face as almost audible words came to me that for me, the purpose of this life is to live with gratitude for the opportunity to participate in the lives of others, and that whether or not my mission was an acceptable offering was the wrong question, because that was about me instead of about God and others. our ministering presence to this humble family in their time of spiritual need, once strangers, but now holding hands as brothers and sisters in Christ, amplified that gratitude in my being. With this experience, I intertwined and interlayered additional vines and layers of meaning around my heart, that my church was true, that I was the child of a God who loved me, and I knew my place in the universe. For the following 3 decades of my life, I had many experiences like these. For example, as a Sunday school teacher, in preparing my lessons, I prayed to God that I might be an instrument in His hands to touch the lives of my class members. On Sundays, with a prayer in my heart, I greeted those class members as they entered the room, and I often felt led by God in the things that I taught. Many times, members approached me after class to express that they really needed specific things that were part of that day's discussion, sometimes even as answers to their prayers. I experienced a constant positive feedback loop of these kinds of experiences, and also serendipitous experiences that happened during my life, for which I continually intertwined and interlayered additional vines and layers of meaning. Nonetheless, the primary meaning I attributed was that these spiritual experiences represented reliable divine witnesses of the truthfulness of my church and its teachings. Now, I should say that over the years, I encountered many things that challenged my testimony and triggered dissonance for me. Things like conflicts in scriptures that I couldn't reconcile, or problematic teachings from church leaders that violated my conscience, things that I couldn't reconcile with what I understood about science and history. I applied critical thinking to other areas of my life, but with regard to my faith, I set those irreconcilable problems aside as if books on a metaphorical shelf, in faith that God would provide me further light and knowledge about them someday. But over time, my shelf grew massive. It was heavy laden and sagging. Nonetheless, the cumulative intertwined vines and layers around my heart had grown into my heart, offering me such a sense of certainty that it prevented me from allowing my metaphorical shelf to collapse. My beliefs, my community, my roles, my reputation, my family connections, how I made sense of life were completely enmeshed in my personal sense of identity and these intertwined vines and layers of meaning around my heart that eventually became one with my heart.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically here I wanted to walk people through the experience of how much I love the church, how I experienced divinity in my life, how I sensed an almost verbal answer to me when I was struggling on my mission that has continued to inform my entire life. I wanted to express how I exercised faith, and why I chose to set aside things to stay in the mainstream of the church. I think it was either Packer or McConkie gave a talk that emphasized the importance of staying in the mainstream of the church and not having gospel hobbies. And I remember being taught that by my mission president. And so I did everything that I could to stay in the mainstream. And I, in coordination with one of my friends that helped me, we had tried to come up with symbolism of how completely enmeshed one's belief and meanings that we attribute to spiritual experiences and in the church. And what we came up with was that the heart and the vines that encompass one's heart and then grow into and become one with one's heart, because then having a shredded heart, the symbolism communicates what the experience, was like for me anyway. But that's part of that first part.
Right. When I watched your TED Talk, when I listened to that excerpt, it's hard for me not to get emotional. It resonates with me, and I'm sure many others as well, in such a very powerful way. Your vulnerability, your strength, your devotion, to the church, to the Lord, to your family, and the emotional struggle and the tearing of the emotional fabric, just the dismantling and trying to make sense of it all, and just an honest soul trying to understand and trying to navigate. And that's what it just resonated with me, and your experience and insight so much. And so there's so much gratitude from me, and I'm sure many others as well. I love the comment there on the TED Talk that you talk about, one of the purposes of being here is to be grateful, to serve others. And that universal principle, Anthony, has never changed for me, even though I'm not in the church anymore. I've left, I've resigned. It's been actually a very good decision for me. I'm in a much better place mentally, because it was such a turmoil for me. But the principle and the practice of serving others, that joy comes from serving others and helping others, and being grateful for that has never changed for me. And that's the kind of that thinking, that approach, that outlook on life has been a constant for me. It's not, even without the church, it's remained constant. Since your experience with the TED Talk, and what was after you left the stage, how did you feel? And my other question is, as you, the subsequent weeks and months after the TED Talk, how did you heal yourself? And the third question, has there been any universal principles, concepts, ideas that have kept you together?
I want to talk about that, but I want to do it after the third part.
Oh, okay.
So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Well, so I am looking at the comments, and apparently, it looks like the TED Talk didn't go through. People didn't see it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, Chuck says, "Uh-oh, did TED Talk shut them down for running that so long?" And another guy says, "What happened?" And Bruce says, "I wonder if the TED Talk was copyrighted and YouTube suspended the live stream because of that."
Oh, interesting. Right.
So I just ask if,
I don't know.
it says TED Talk came through. Inside Out. Ooh, Bruce says it went off after the TED Talk for about 60 seconds, stating violation.
Okay.
TED Talk came through, but a cut of about a minute post clip of Anthony's commentary, it blacked out while you were chatting after the talk, have a message of copyright violation. No, we saw it, but then suspended your live stream for a few seconds. So I'm not sure how to proceed here. Should we continue to show? And I don't know. Ian, have you had a revelation? You have revelations often.
I do, and I'm having one right now on behalf of the podcast. Anyway, I think it's probably an auto thing, right? So there's some algorithm built in the TED Talk. I don't think anyone from TED Talk is watching this, and and if you are, by the way,
automated. Yeah,
I'm sure it's all automatic.
It's automatic, yeah. And so I'd be brave and just try it again. I just give it another whirl and see what happens. It's up to Anthony. Whatever you think.
Well, Guy MC Dude said the TED Talk went through.
But Deek Design said you might want to be careful showing the TED Talk. It might kill the live stream. So
maybe we won't go more than 2 minutes and then stop a little bit.
Okay, let's see how that goes.
Yeah, let's live dangerously for 2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
All right.
Okay.
Then 6 years ago, our 22-year-old son came out to us as gay. In my church, the only valid paths for him would be to live a completely celibate life, painfully absent comprehensive love, or to live in a mixed orientation marriage, also without full capacity for comprehensive love for him or for his wife. Deep in my heart, the God I knew wouldn't want my son to live a life painfully absent the kinds of comprehensive love that my wife and I share. I couldn't metaphorically shelf that depth of cruelty as coming from the God I knew. So that evening, I anxiously searched online for resources as to how a believer could support a gay son. In my search on my church's website, I accidentally stumbled across what are called the church history gospel topics essays that discuss topics I had always led to believe were anti-church lies. As it turns out, they weren't lies. They were just history. I consumed the balance of my...
Okay, we're seeing in the comments that we are getting another copyright violation.
All right. So, hey, you guys, let us know if you can see us now talking, and then we'll talk about it.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. So even for 2 minutes, it's kind of just shutting us down, eh? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we're still. It says it's blacked out again. Policy violation.
Some kind of algorithm in there, Anthony, isn't it? Auto shutting down. Okay. All right.
Just shoot. Let us know when we're back up.
Are we the whole podcast?
Oh, rejected my comment. Oh.
Okay, Jim, are we not live right now?
It says we're live.
Okay.
Oh crud! The live stream is still going at some sort of auto detect system.
Have we broken inside out? They destroyed us. We will rebuild.
So go ahead and minimize the share then.
Okay.
Yeah, it might because we're still showing it, right? I can still see it. Is that what you're suggesting, Anthony?
Yeah, go ahead and
yeah, just
go ahead
kind
and
of
minimize it.
step out of it, Jim. And probably,
Stop the screen
that's
share.
probably the problem. But we're still showing it. Yeah. Interesting, right?
Oh, wow.
Well,
Oh, can you guys hear us even though the screen is black?
have the comments coming through, Jim? Are we live?
Is it still black? Right now, it is still showing the notice. Out of solidarity, as long as the live stream is going, I'll continue to watch even with this black screen.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So there are 4 people that said we're back. All right.
Are we back?
I think it wouldn't even let me comment a couple times. It said I was spamming our own channel. So I think.
Oh, okay.
I think we're going to have to discuss your TED Talk and not show your TED Talk.
All right.
Out of darkness there for a few seconds.
That is so weird because what's his name? Burke put it on his channel and didn't get a copyright. The Mormon News, whatever, Roundup or whatever it was.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, he did it and it didn't get a copyright.
Divas.
Yeah, Divas is his pseudonym. Yeah.
We know Divas. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, what we were going to watch was from 5:45 to 12 minutes 6 seconds, and I wanted to walk through what I couldn't metaphorically shelf, and then what it was like to recognize that my spiritual experiences, as I read the essays, that I recognized that my spiritual experiences in many cases had been unreliable means to discern truth because they had corresponded with things that were either partially or entirely inaccurate. And another thing as I read the essays is that I perceived as I read the essays that past brethren had spiritual experiences and testimonies about things that are now disavowed. So it wasn't only me for whom the attribution of meaning that I was giving to my spiritual experiences had failed. And then as I also continue to read the essays and the footnotes and cited sources, I recognized that the brethren of my youth disciplined scholars for publishing about the very things that are in the essays, which felt like spiritual abuse, right? To do that. And then also as I read the essays, I perceived that, or my experience with the essays is that they weren't completely honest because they took like with the race and the priesthood essay, they took a quote. It feels to me out of context to mislead the reader as to what the phrase that that blacks would have all the blessings of the priesthood and more, out of context, to try to mislead the reader to believe that Brigham Young prophesied of what happened in 1978 and that he would have supported it, kind of thing. So I ended up with a complete collapse because I recognized that my spiritual experiences weren't what I thought they were. I perceived that the same had been true for the brethren. And then I lost trust in the brethren because it felt like they had committed spiritual abuse and that the essays themselves were misleading or dishonest. And all of that together triggered my dark night of the soul, because the only way that I knew God was through the meanings that I attributed to those spiritual experiences. And so the traumatic experience to my metaphorical heart or soul of recognizing that all of these meanings weren't what I thought they were, even though I had all these treasured experiences, like the answer from my mission and other things. I experienced the heavens going dark, and as if God had never existed in the first place in the midst of all of that. In the story then, I explained how I cried myself to sleep most nights. I counseled with my bishop, with my stake presidency. I got blessings. I consumed large volumes of apologetics. Most of the apologetics that I read and watched and listened to dealt with, to me, it seemed like they dealt with trying to come up with a reasoned explanation as to why complexities happened. But I could not find apologetics that dealt with the issue that spiritual experiences had been something other than what I thought they were. And for me and for the brethren, and how I couldn't find answers as to why the brethren would commit what I thought was spiritual abuse in excommunicating and disciplining scholars for publishing what was in the essays in the prior decades, without some sort of intervention from God. So anyway, so that's what I shared in that about 6.5 minute section, and how painful it was. And I walked the audience through disassociation and suicidal ideation. And over the years in counseling and supporting people going through faith transition, I've come to the realization that suicidal ideation is not uncommon for people in complete existential crisis, particularly if they're responded to very poorly by their leaders and friends.
Anthony, how much, let me go back, did you communicate to the church leaders, your leaders, about the TED Talk? Did you also get the support that you needed going through this experience? And if I may ask, what was the reaction from the church leaders after the TED Talk?
Yeah, those are great questions. So when I was in the midst of my faith crisis, my bishop did the best that he could do. He agreed to call me as assistant scoutmaster instead of ward mission leader. He told me that I could attend whatever I wanted to attend. But he didn't want me to talk about the essays at church. And then the stake presidency are also close friends. I had worked with them over the year. One of them was a business partner, and they were bishops when I was in the High Council and things like that. They really didn't have answers for me either. none of them had read the essays. And by the time they had read the essays, there was such a knowledge gap because I was consuming large volumes of information from the cited sources. One of the friends that I found in the Waters of Mormon, what's now called the Waters of Mormon Facebook support group, had worked in the church history department when the essays were being developed. And his name is Brian. And I asked him, how do I know what information to put credence into? And he suggested that I focus my study on materials that had been nominated for awards by the Mormon History Association and the John Whitmer Historical Association, as opposed to like Jeremy Reynolds, content, or even, Mormon Think content, which appears to be well cited and so forth. He suggested focus on things that have received those kinds of awards. They're more likely to be peer reviewed. They're more likely to have critical historical scholarship and things like that. Eventually, with the support of my bishop, because he saw what it was doing to me, and he saw how members of the ward were reacting to me, because they were pretty cruel. Some suggested that my wife should divorce me. Others spread rumors that I had some serious sin and I was stealing from clients and things like that, trying to mess with my business. But he suggested he agreed that it'd be good that if I took a sabbatical and stopped attending, because it was so incredibly painful for me to do that. So I think my leaders, even though they didn't really have satisfying answers for me, they did the best they could with what the information they had. I think it was members of our ward and stake primarily who felt the most threatened, because I worked the Friday morning shift at the temple for many years. I had been their high priest group leader. I had been on the high council, things like that, and they couldn't wrap their head around how I could have a collapse of faith, and that felt very threatening to them. And so they referred to me as the apostate. And some of my friends told me how they would get angry at members of the ward and stake when they would do that. But so the rest of your question is what happened at the end after I gave my TED Talk. I intentionally gave my TED Talk for it to be something that would be safe for believing members to watch, so that they could have an idea of what an acute existential faith and identity crisis is like. Not everybody has the same experience, but it resonates with some people, and almost universally, the feedback that I got from believing members was positive. It were things like, it really helped me understand my spouse or my brother or my sister or my neighbor better. There were only a couple apologists that said, like one apologist said, Anthony, you need to come back to the church. It's clear that you don't have peace in your life because of the distress that you expressed in your TED Talk, kind of thing. But most everybody, just everyone except for a couple apologists, was positive. Now, as far as locally, I don't really know if my local leaders ever watched my TED Talk. I'm sure they knew it happened. But none of them have ever talked to me about it unless they subsequently went through some sort of faith transition. So that was kind of unexpected. But nobody none of them have talked to me about it. And I don't know, maybe now they think it's happened so long ago to not even worry about it unless I bring it up. But anyway, I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you.
There's a comment here, Ian, that I want to share because, it says, on the race to the priesthood essay, does anyone remember the old Mormon expression episode called Mike Tannehill, the unintentional racist?
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, Ian, does the name Mike Tannehill mean anything to you?
No, it does not. No.
Mike Tannehill served a mission in Scotland.
Oh,
I guess you had gone home by the time he got there because he keeps talking about President McConkie. I don't ever remember meeting him, so he may have come out after me, but President McConkie, Joseph Fielding McConkie, Bruce R.'s son,
Yeah.
replaced our mission president, Ben B. Banks, in the last 3-4 months of my mission. And this guy served in Scotland and just absolutely racist beyond words and just absolutely disgusted with the Gospel Topics essay. I mean, very much along the lines of our friend that we interviewed a while back, Ian. But
we're talking about the UK guy, the Brit guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Mike would go on Mormon Expression, and he was pretty active on social media. But
I haven't seen him around much lately, but I've also blocked him a lot.
Yeah. So but he thought the essays were blasphemous. The disavowal of the reasons for the ban he thought were blasphemous because I can't remember if because it stretched him like it stretched me, and that it goes to discernment, divine appointment and discernment. If individually and collectively, most of all the brethren for over a century had spiritual experiences and testimonies to which they attributed meaning, and how they attributed meaning to the book of Abraham and other scriptures, indicating that there were little lineal descendants of Cain that, had a priesthood restriction. He had a very, very hard time with that because of what the implications were. And so, yeah, he thought the essays were apostate.
There's a woman in my ward that says the same thing. She stood up and she said, well, they're going to change those essays. Those were only written by BYU. Those were never, ever approved by the brethren. And I'm just thinking, what planet are you on?
Yeah.
I mean, those essays have been sitting there for over a decade now.
Yeah.
For 13 years with the race and the priesthood, which was the first one, I think.
Yeah.
You think the church just hasn't noticed them? I mean, it's just ludicrous the length people will go to justify continued bigotry.
Well, even so, I mean, when I initially had my faith crisis and tried to talk to members of my ward and stake about it, several of them didn't believe they were authorized. And I wasn't the only one going through faith transition triggered by the essays. There were quite a few on the stake, I found out. And so the stake presidency decided to have the High Council study the essays. I think they did one a week in the stake High Council meeting, and went through them. And the result of that, my understanding of the result of that, was they instructed the bishops that the essays were for personal and home study. And unless the brethren came out and said you should do a fifth Sunday or have a separate Sunday school class to talk about the essays, we're not going to do that. And of course, then subsequently, the essays became resource material for the gospel doctrine year in 2017. So they did get talked about in our ward and stake. But in 2016, I couldn't find very many people that had read them, and I heard the kinds of things, Jim, like you just referred to, that people thought they were not authorized.
Did you see that comment from Colby I put up?
Yes.
Since Jim is addressing this is Colby, by the way, boys. Hello, Colby. Mike was convinced the Gospel Topics essay on the priesthood ban was fake and a lie.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, Ian, didn't you have the experience of being told that it was?
Yeah. So, Anthony, you know this. I've shared this with you. The Race of the Priesthood is the essay that unraveled it all for me. This is 2013.
I think it's the most of the people that I've talked to. It's the most common essay for people that were fully believing to trigger. There are others, but it's the most frequent.
For me, it was. I always had a strong negative reaction to the decision to ban blacks from the temple and priesthood. Within weeks of joining the church, this is back in '82, so I'd only been in the church 4 years after the removal of the ban, and it never made sense to me. It was worse than that. It was just an awful racist doctrine, and it just never felt right. But you couldn't talk about this, certainly not when I was, the age of 16, growing up in that part of the world, in the church at that time, for me at least. Fast forward to 2013, and this is the same month or two, I think Elder Updorf gave his classic talk, Come Join Us, and that was an interesting talk for sure. But the Race and the Priesthood essay came out, and when I read that, I thought, well, this is good. This is an important step, acknowledging that the church is disavowing anything that is any form of racism. I've not got it in front of me, and I thought that was just huge, and it was one step to helping me evidence that I needed to see that the church was acknowledging this mistake. I interpreted it as the church had made a mistake. I was serving on a stake presidency in British Columbia at the time, and when I came across the essay, I was presiding at a meeting. I was in charge of the south part of the stake. That's how we organized it. And I was presiding at a meeting, and I talked about the essay, and the reaction was, I was stood up with excitement and said, brothers and sisters, this is extraordinary. The church produced an essay. But guess what the reaction was? This was in a joint release cited priesthood training session. This is after sacrament. It was pretty much stone cold. It was just a cold silence. People hadn't come across it at that time. Or not very many. The essays at that time were hid. It was difficult to find. Anyway, later that day, within an hour or two, I was pulled aside by just a few regular members who were very concerned that I'd even mentioned this, and said that the material I'd read was either anti-Mormon, or the church website had been hacked, or it was written by a scholar or a historian, and it was just a piece for the members. It was just some theory, some concept, some idea that someone was sharing that had found its way onto the website, but it wasn't official. As I researched that and learned that it was official and talked about it a few more times, I was shut down, summarily shut down by other people who were more senior than me, and advised and counseled not to talk about it. And that was the beginning of how the whole thing unraveled for me. The church, I feel very strongly about this, because this is the thing that really, actually, I'm very grateful for the essay, because without the essay, I wouldn't be where I am today, frankly. Or would I? That's not correct. I think I would be where I am today, but that was the thing that really triggered my questions, my critical thinking that you talked about on the TED Talk at that time. So I would be where I am, but I think that coming out at that time was when the whole thing started to unravel for me. So I was able to win back some of my life that I feel the church stole from me. I believe and feel firmly that the church has acted appallingly, disgracefully, cowardly, by not just being as genuine, as truthful and factual on the essays as it should have been. I think it's misdirected. I think it's misinformation. It's certainly written things out of context. It certainly has done that in the Race and the Priesthood, taking that quote from Brigham Young mischaracterized it. But the thing I find most cowardly, Anthony, Jim, is the church releases this material and then lets it's just like throwing an hand grenade into a room and letting the whole thing go off. And the church leaders are like, you figure it out. We've written this essay. You figure it out. Let the bishops deal with it. Let the stake presidents deal with it. We're not going to talk about it at the pulpit at General Conference. We're not going to talk about it for years to come because we want to see your reaction. We want to see how you're going to react. So we won't talk about it. We'll hide the essays somewhere, make them hard to find. The ones who don't come across it, well, hey, it was always there, right? I think the church has acted absolutely disgracefully and cowardly. And the fact that they don't have the balls to talk about the essays at General Conference, at the pulpit. And we heard this earlier today, Jim. I love that, with Richard Osler, who talked about the importance and significance that the church should unteach things that were wrong. It's taught all this stuff. Earlier on a podcast we did today, we learned that how important it is to unteach things. So if we teach things that are wrong or false or inaccurate or wholly half-truths, if we're going to live the lesson which is in the old Gospel Principles Handbook, which is on my shelf here, titled Honesty, where we're completely upfront, open and honest about a doctrine and we don't hold anything back, we don't misdirect, we don't keep anything back according to that lesson. And we give all the facts so people can be informed. If we go, if we're going to take the church seriously, it has to follow its own counsel, its own teachings by being completely honest and having the trust and faith that the members will come to, the right conclusion. Only by being honest and open about these things and bringing these things to the surface will people learn. And that's how you help people go through these faith crises, by talking about them, by talking them openly and having a position on them and acknowledging mistakes that were made. This is how people make sense of the difficulty that they're going through. Had they done that, had the leadership shown real leadership, spiritual leadership, and not spiritual abuse by handling it in the way that they have, people like me and you and many of the people perhaps wouldn't have gone through the same trauma that we went through, by talking about these things, by having a leader to talk about these things and saying, look, we've made some mistakes. We're trying to address it. And let's talk about it at General Conference, having an official conversation. But they've not done that. And they're still not doing that, are they?
So I actually have some thoughts about that and some inside information. So the thoughts about that were there was a long period of time where the approach was in dealing with difficult issues was coming from a defensive standpoint, and to not give ammunition to critics of the church or enemies of the church, things like that, and to not, and also there was a culture among the brethren, is my understanding, to defer to the quorum of the 15 members with the most seniority, and then to not do anything that would damage trust or loyalty to those with the most seniority, or to damage the history, the heritage, and that kind of thing. And so one way that we see that manifest was how the whole process happened when Leonard Arrington and Richard Bushman and Michael Quinn were transferred from the history department to BYU, because there were some of the senior brethren at that time that felt like what was being allowed during the Camelot years was providing too much ammunition to the critics of the church. And then soon after that transfer happened is when Elder Packard gave the mantle is far, far greater than the intellect talk, where he expressed that the historians of the church they idolize the truth and the transparency, but what he felt like the historians of the church should do is act like lawyers and focus on presenting narratives that protect faith and the reputation of the church. And so I think so the inside information is that standpoint or that perspective, this conceptual framework of protecting faith, being loyal to those with the most seniority, to not give ammunition, to discourage historians through church discipline and other matters from showing too many warts, was the idea. But we grew up in an age, I'm turning 60 this year, so I'm not that much far apart from you guys. We grew up in an age where academics focused more on transparency than on telling polished narratives like Washington and the Cherry Tree. So we grew up with this conceptual framework that people are messy and we need to be transparent, and integrity means, do what is right, let the consequence follow, which was in conflict with the defensive posture of the church. And what ended up happening is in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, with the advancement of critical historical scholarship in Mormon studies, there was more and more information coming out that was coming out much faster than Packer or others who felt like him could respond to. And then the internet happened. So that public access to uncorrelated information, or to find out, to read Rough Stone Rolling, the precursor of Rough Stone Rolling. Can't remember what Bushman titled it, but it was a book. And my understanding is that book was one of the primary reasons that Leonard Arrington was let go as the church historian, and they were transferred because there were leaders at that time that felt that it showed too much of the messiness. So
I think I have to push back on the timeline on that.
Okay.
Was published in 2005. Leonard Arrington was the church historian. Leonard Arrington died in 1999. So I can't imagine that Rough Stone Rolling could have had any.
No, it was the precursor to Rough Stone Rolling.
Oh, okay. So was it a Richard Bushman book, or was it?
Yeah, it was called.
Oh yeah, he had another book, didn't he?
Yeah. Joseph Smith and the Beginnings of Mormonism in 1984.
Okay, that timeline works just fine.
That was the precursor to Rough Stone Rolling. So I think, have you ever seen the video about the backwards bicycle? There's like a TED Talk or something about it. Anyway, this guy who's an engineer, he had engineers put together a bicycle that when you turned the handlebars, the front steering would go the opposite of how you turned it. And he spent hours and hours and hours trying to learn how to ride this backward bicycle. And eventually he got to a point where he could ride it, 5 feet or something like that. But when he could, then he wasn't able to ride a regular bicycle anymore because of how our brains work. And then he had his kid, who, I don't know, might've been 5 or 8 years old, ride it and picked it right up. Right. So the premise of that is that we end up with neurological grooves, essentially, in terms of how we perceive and experience things and what we have the capacity to do. And the suggestion is when you have these men in their that have been in leadership for many, many decades that are very, very aged, it's increasingly difficult for them to flip. For Packer to have voted to approve the race and the priesthood essay, that was like a huge change from the mantle is far, far greater than the intellect talk, right? That's huge. So I agree with what you're saying, Ian. At the same time, I don't know that they could have done any differently, because it was like riding a backwards bicycle. They couldn't shift and say, what we're going to do is we're going to be totally transparent, and we're going to say, for Oaks, if he could have said in that B1 talk, if he could have said, he said, I could never gain a testimony of the reasons for the ban, but he expressed that you have to trust the brethren because they have the stewardship, something like that.
Right.
If he could have just said, I couldn't, there were some things that I couldn't trust that they said, that would be like what you're suggesting, Ian, and those are the kinds of conversations that I've seen Jim is like express, that we just need to be transparent, right? And not have these expectations that people lose agency and they're infallible because they have a calling, kind of thing.
Right.
But I agree with you, Ian, because that's how my brain worked, is that I wanted them to be transparent. I wanted them to say in the essay, I wanted them to disavow the ban in the essay. I wanted them to say that there was never a revelation for the ban, and we can't find any evidence that it was anything more than human racism, kind of thing.
I love Jim to read some of the comments, but I just want to respond real quick, 30 seconds here. And this is what your insights and your comments in the past and your wisdom and your experience resonated with you so strongly, because you're like me, your soul, and Jim's the same as well. Your soul longs for truth, right? There's something in us that we just want the honesty and the truth and the transparency, because it's how we built, it's how we made, it's just how we are. And everybody's like that. I get that. And for me, my mother always taught that honesty is the best policy. No matter what, being honest about stuff, I know people might disagree with that on certain things, and maybe there's some things that we can't always be honest on. But when it comes to promising salvation and taking your life, your time, do you know how much time we've invested into the church? It's colossal. I just thousands of hours, right, of time away from family and personal time, going to all these meetings, half of which were completely useless. But you give your entire soul, devote your entire life, and that comes through very strongly in your TED Talk. And if you haven't listened to it, everybody, you've got to go listen to Anthony's TED Talk. It's extraordinary. So you sell this, and you have to be. It's like financial advice that you're in. You have rules and regulations. Around giving advice on financial advice, and if you don't follow the rules, there are serious consequences. And I think the church has got off the hook because it's robbed people of its time, and that's what I think is cowardly. Go ahead.
So there are a couple other things that I wanted to say about my TED Talk, as well as respond. So in the whole scheme of things, I think what you're talking about eventually is getting there, but that it's just taking time, and there are casualties, And so Jeff Strong expressed, if I understand correctly, 40% of the people who were active believing in 2000 have left the church, which to me, that would mean they were Gen Xers and boomers. And younger generations are growing up with more transparency. We grew up with a defensive approach. And so sometimes I wonder if we're they just decided we're a lost generation, kind of thing. But about my TED Talk, I did, there were things that I wanted to include. I wanted to express that, that there's symbolism, that it was the people who had gone through a faith transition, whether or not they stayed in the church, were the ones who were able to catch me. And there's so few people like Jim or Jeff Strong or David Osler that wrote Bridges, that maybe haven't had a complete existential crisis, who can hold grace for people that have. But it's inspiring to see what Jeff is doing, what David Osler did. I bought dozens of Bridges of those books and gave them to people, and to see what Jim is doing. I think that's all very helpful. I feel like people going through faith crisis today are in a better position than they were 10 or 20 years ago, because there are mentors everywhere. Like, we can find people, everyone knows someone who's gone through a faith transition. So there's someone to talk to. And I didn't know who to talk to 10 years ago. So, and then when I wrapped up my TED Talk, I tied everything in together, that the purpose of my life, to live with gratitude for the opportunity to participate in the lives of others, is the same. And I experience transcendence and connection and meaning and purpose the same. I just attribute different meanings to it than I used to. And that's what I tried to express with my talk. I'm bummed that we weren't able to watch it, but anyway, thanks for letting me share those things.
Of course.
Well, do you want, so I'm just going to, there's so many great comments. I'm just going to jump around because we don't want to be. So Colby arrived and said, "Good evening, randos." The flag, the tech talk on the outside, because Inside Out is the only true and living podcast on the face of the whole earth. Thank you, Bruce. We do not speak of Dives after what he did to Colch. I'm out if he comes up. Sorry, he came up because of your comment. We won't speak of him again, but we're not fans.
Yeah.
New evening, Colby. Okay. Dark night of the soul is the natural consequence of equating truth to positive feelings framed as whispering of the Holy Ghost. Feelings are not reliable and are often manipulated. That's true, and that's a true point of your TED Talk.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the reasons why there are moments in my life where I feel like I have had genuine revelation in my life. I can count those moments on one hand. I mean, I was praying, for instance. I had always heard you're supposed to pray to know who you're going to marry.
Yeah.
And I was dating the woman who is now my wife, and I kept praying to know if I ought to marry her. And I got nothing, just absolutely nothing. It wasn't a stupor of thought. Well, I kept looking for all the scriptural phrases, but there's nothing. And then I'm kneeling across the altar in the Salt Lake Temple.
Yeah.
And Ben B. Banks declared that we had been sealed for time and all eternity. And I got the most profound just moment of, you are doing absolutely the right thing, and I think you're going to have a wonderful life together. And this is, I mean, everything that I was looking for after I had already done it.
Yeah.
And there in the temple at the moment when I got married, I was mad. I was mad at God. I was like, I could have used that 30 seconds ago. This would have been helpful. Thanks. You maybe go through all of this. You maybe, but that's kind of been a lesson to me, is that really is what mortality is. I am so skeptical of all of the people. I mean, there are people that get revelations about what brand of toothpaste they ought to use.
Yeah.
That think that God micromanages their life through the Holy Ghost with these little tiny, and I just don't buy any of that anymore. So I'm not willing to throw the entire idea of a Holy Ghost out the window, because feelings are in fact easily manipulated, and so often people mistake those feelings for something profound. But I still think there is something profound like that.
I think it was Gina Colvin that shared with me years ago that a lot of faith traditions refer to experiences of spirit as communion with the divine.
Yeah.
And that a lot of us, our experience in Mormonism was to attribute something beyond communion with the divine to those experiences, that it meant the church was true, or it meant the thing that we taught was true, or putting it in a box instead of just approaching it with wonder and curiosity and awe and communion with the divine, or just being part of something that's larger than us. I mean, it could be a combination of all of those things. But I agree that it makes the more, I feel like the more in a box, the more specific and limited to which we attribute meanings to the things, the more brittle it becomes.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of people who go through a faith transition that grew up believing Latter-day Saints, the more literal and in a box their attribution of meaning to God was, like the more King Follett discourse, kind of, or something, attribution of meaning to God was, the more brittle it ends up becoming for them, and the more likely they find themselves not being able to attribute meaning to anything related to the divine after that, in terms of atheism or agnosticism. It feels like that there's a correlation there, and that people who didn't have as much fundamentalist, literalist kind of attribution of meaning to things don't necessarily have the same experience. They might still be largely agnostic, but they might be more open to attributions of meaning to something that's larger or deeper than us, kind of thing, is my sense. So I agree with what that comment was expressing, and with what you shared, Jim.
Very much appreciate that. If everything is divine, then nothing is divine. And it's, I always get frustrated, like you're sitting through just another really dull sacrament meeting, and somebody stands up and at the end and says, "We appreciate the spirit that's been here with us today."
Yeah.
Spirit of what? It's what Greg Pritz calls Christ-like boredom. Christ-centered boredom is how he describes it. When we say everything is the spirit, then nothing is the spirit. It just doesn't work. Anyway, sorry. It is crazy that a faith practice, this is Black Priesthood 4791, I think,
Okay.
that values life, honesty, integrity, transparency from adherents would be the very source and genesis of religious and spiritual abuse of members who ask questions. That's a great point. Colby came in and everybody talked about how handsome he is.
Oh, for sure.
This is the problem. The LDS Church sends confusing, conflicting messaging. The essays had no prophetic signatures, no public release, no general conference talks. No wonder members are confused. It's an excellent point. And there, I think if you were to poll the entire active membership of the church, you wouldn't get a majority of people who knew the gospel topics essays even exist. Certainly not a majority of people who've actually read them. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay, then the people say back and forth, hello. They talk about, Uchtdorf gets some love from Colby. Uchtdorf's talk was one of the best we've ever gotten in General Conference, and look where it got him. And we've talked about that many times. The confusion is deliberate and cowardice in its attempt to assuage the issue, thus allowing the members to interpret it any way they like.
I agree.
Uchtdorf will probably clean things up once he becomes president. At least that is the hope. Everybody's sort of pinning all of their hope on Uchtdorf because after Uchtdorf is Bednar. And if things don't change under Uchtdorf, it's very unlikely that they're going to change under Bednar, I would think.
I mean, that's my take, but everybody is. A lot of people held out hope for a Holland presidency and an Uchtdorf president of the Quorum of the 12.
Yeah.
So I don't know what will happen, and we'll support people, and we'll do what we do, regardless of what happens. Right?
Correct.
I mean, that's how I feel about it.
The level of delusion from Colby again, we see again with members, including some apologists, originally skeptical of the church's denouncement of Tim Ballard and hiring of Aaron Sherinian. Absolutely. And Colby also says, Bruce, I've never rooted for a German leader so hard. Either of you fans of Norm Macdonald? Do you remember Norm
The
Macdonald?
comedian, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
He's like,
He's Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that Hitler, I never cared for him. I thought that was very, very funny. Ian is spicy lately. I love it.
What does that mean?
There you go. That's a analogy of the holy hand grenade. Anytime you invoke Monty Python, that's good. 3 shall be the number of the counting, and the number of the counting shall be 3.
That was a good accent, really good British accent.
Thank you very much. Let's see. So yeah, then they talk about chiasmus for a while, and then they talk about their brains. Chuck says, "I have Mormon wrinkles in my brain."
Yep.
Neurological grooves make so much sense.
It does. Yes.
My kids tell me I'm smooth brain. Well, okay. So, yeah, this is. Oh, this is praise for Bridges from Guy McDude. Bridges helped me and my wife have our early mixed faith marriage conversations. It really moved the emotional reaction and create dialogue. I recommend it to folks often.
Yeah.
I think I just got played by Jim, he said. Well, sorry, I'm not sure what I did. Well, thank God you got the confirmation and not the other result. Oh, yeah, I think he's talking about my...
Yes.
Yeah.
If you had gotten a different answer after the fact.
Terrifying. You idiot. What have you done? Yeah. Yeah. This is so true. I have a sister-in-law that has received revelation that at least 10 people are going to be her one. You find that so often. I mean, it used to be there was an old Calvin Grandal cartoon. I don't know if anybody remembers him. He did really some funny Mormon cartoons, and it was a guy at the Cougar Eat at BYU saying, "You do not know me, but the Spirit has revealed that you are to be my wife." And that happened a lot. And there are young women that were taught that the way stewardship and answers to prayer work, that they were supposed to put trust in that. I mean, it's not universal, but that happened. Too. Bruce says, and I would agree with this, I believe with my whole heart that those who have left the church still receive divine manifestations for their life just as much as when they were in the church. I think, God is not in a box. I think that anybody can connect with the divine. This is how I have connected with the divine, and I've stayed in the church, but I respect people who make a different decision. Medic design, I don't buy the micromanaging God either. Completely illogical.
Yeah.
Speaking of TED Talks, please watch This Is Your Brain on God.
Yes.
Tell me about that. I've never heard of
that. So it's a TED Talk given by, I think Jared Anderson? I think he's a neuroscientist, and it's TEDx University of Utah or TEDx Salt Lake. And they did a study where they put people in functional MRI machines and then looked at what their brain activity was when they would listen to scriptures or hymns or conference talks or things like that. And and they would have similar neurological activity in the functional MRI machine, whether or not it was like Desmond Tutu or an apostle that taught things. And so people had spiritual experience, in quotes, based on their neurological activity and release of dopamine in their system when they listened to something inspiring. But that didn't help them figure out whether it was, it wasn't the Pope, but if I were to give that as an example, the Pope versus Elder Bednar giving a thought. If people felt spirit, they attributed it to a church member, even though it could have been the Pope. And so, anyway, it's a great TED Talk. This is Your Brain on God. I think it's Jared Anderson. No, it's Michael Ferguson. Bruce Butcher just shared it. Michael Ferguson.
Yeah, Colby Reddish just shared a link to it in there.
There you go. Yeah, fantastic. It's fantastic TED Talk.
Okay, so we're almost at the end of the comments. There are a couple about Revelation. There are those some people want to attribute everything to God. That's just the way the heads are wired.
Yeah.
Colby, Bednar, now is the great day of my power. Okay, I'm not going to click on this one, Chuck KV, because it says, Jim, you used my comment to bring up again. A pox upon you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bring up who you bring up again in this comment.
He who shall not be named.
He shall not be named.
Yes.
Michael Ferguson. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's the link, and that's the last comment.
There we go. Jim, thank you. You did a great job. We're coming to an end here. This has been extraordinary. I once again, Anthony, I get so much from my conversations with you. I'm so grateful to you. I really want to express my love and appreciation to you for the personal help that you gave me through that very difficult time. Just the comments that you were writing, it just helped me through, that darkest, most perilous moment in my life at that time. I thought I was just falling apart, frankly, and you were the beacon. I look at you as a beacon, and I'm grateful to you for that.
Thank you.
We want to give you the final word here. Jim, before we do that, do you have any final comments and thoughts about the conversation with Anthony this evening?
Just always a delight, Anthony. Always love to have you here, and always would love to have you back. I just think you are such a great model of kindness, of empathy, of respectful engagement after leaving the church. I just think you have blessed and benefited so many lives, including Ian's and including my own. So
thanks, Jim. I really appreciate that. So I haven't watched all your episodes, but I've listened to quite a few and watched some. I'm excited with what you guys are doing, and I want you to continue. I hope that you continue. So I think it's good. It's always good to hear Greg Prince, right?
Always.
But some of the other people that you've spoken with, they're just good. They're conversations that are helpful to have. And I mean, my hope for the future, I just finished Jeff's book yesterday. And I mean, if I were to summarize it, I thought it was helpful because he did a study and had statistics, and it seems to correspond with other studies and statistics from other sources, right? But then for the rest of the book, he, in different ways, teaches that the teachings attributed to Jesus are the answer, right? And but he shares a lot of ways that is the case, and I kind of feel like the more the culture of the church and the more the leaders of the church emphasize the teachings attributed to Jesus, I think that will be more helpful for these mixed faith relationships, and potentially having less brittle of a faith. And I like to see that Jeff. I like to see the conversations you have, and I like the direction that things are going. I kind of pulled back for a period of time of actively participating in the podcast realm and so forth, because it felt overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like it's like a never-ending passenger train crash, that car after car is crashing, and vicariously, as you try to support people, it can weigh on you, right? But I feel like there are a lot more people today to mentor and support, and I am interested in returning to have more of these kinds of conversations too. I didn't do a lot for about a year or two. I did go on Gustavo's podcast.
Oh, I met Gustavo on Sunday, and
I saw the picture. Yeah.
yeah, and
He did a 3-hour episode with John Deland.
Yeah, he told me he was going to John's right after he came to Music and the Spoken Word, and he is translating my CES letter reply into Spanish.
Oh,
he says he's 2/3 of the way done.
okay.
Like, wow, good for you, Gustavo.
That's a long reply.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah. I went on his. I did it in Spanish, and then people from my mission saw it. So people from my mission learned my story from watching my Spanish discussion with Gustavo, and they were graceful when they reached out to me. So in Barcelona, Spain. Anyway, I just really appreciate you inviting me, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Anthony, it's such a blessing to have you on Inside Out. We're so grateful for your time. We express our love and gratitude to you. Thank you for your TED Talk. And for those who are here for the first time, or you've just come on just now, go watch Anthony Miller's TED Talk. It's extraordinary. It can transform your life. It's quite profound.
Thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much. You're just a wonderful blessing. Jim, thank you. Do you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I just laughed, and I wasn't laughing at you or at Anthony, because I just read this last comment from Colby. Is it a tight or loose translation? Which I thought was pretty funny. All right. So.
And just one final piece of information for our listeners and viewers. We're very grateful that you're here, by the way. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Anthony as much as Jim and I have. Is that we are going to be doing more with Sandra Tanner. Sandra Tanner's coming on to Inside Out Live next Tuesday. And Anthony, we meet with Jeff Strong on Thursday. And we're also doing many more episodes with Greg Prince.
Great.
Greg, you listen to this, you don't know that you're stuck with us for the rest of your life. Well, that's the penalty you have to pay for being associated with Inside Out. We're going to be more episodes with Greg Prince. We've got
Awesome.
John Sweeney coming on shortly. There's a whole just extraordinary lineup of wonderful talent over the next few weeks and months coming on to Inside Out, both live and this is live tonight and the audio. So we're here to stay. We're grateful to you, Anthony, for your support and love, and we hope to get you back on soon. To you both, thank you so much. And to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you for your support. We love you and appreciate you and are grateful for all of your kind thoughts and all of your words of wisdom and support. Anthony, thank you. Jim, thank you.
Thanks to both of you, and thanks so much for all the comments. Sorry we didn't read all of them, but we will look forward to seeing you next time on Inside Out. And I'm going to press the button.